Steve Irwin spent his entire life believing he could protect his family from anything. Dangerous snakes, 15-foot crocodiles, television fame, public pressure. He faced all of it head-on without fear. But nearly 20 years after his death, the one battle he never saw coming has quietly shaken his family harder than almost anything before it. And when Terri Irwin suddenly stopped mid-sentence during a public interview in Las Vegas, fans immediately realized something deeper was happening behind the smiles. Robert Irwin looked away from the cameras. Terri struggled to finish her thought, and for the first time in a long time, the usually unshakable Irwin family looked emotionally exhausted. What followed became one of the most talked-about celebrity moments of the year, not because of scandal or controversy, but because millions of people suddenly realized how much pain this family has been carrying in silence. The emotional moment unfolded during the third annual Steve Irwin Gala in Las Vegas. The Bellagio Ballroom had been transformed into a tribute to Steve's life and legacy. Australian wildlife themes filled the room. Conservation donors mingled with celebrities. Robert Irwin was surrounded by friends from Dancing with the Stars. The atmosphere was warm, emotional, and celebratory. But before the night even properly began, guests noticed something important. One chair at the Irwin family table was empty. Again, for the second year in a row, Bindi Irwin was missing from the gala honoring her father. At first, many people assumed she was simply busy at Australia Zoo. But as reporters crowded around Terri and Robert on the carpet, it became obvious there was more to the story than scheduling conflicts. Terri tried to smile as she answered questions about her daughter. She explained that Bindi was doing much better now, but traveling had become difficult during this stage of her recovery. She reassured everyone that Bindi hoped to attend next year and was staying close to home for now. Then Terri delivered one sentence that instantly exploded across social media. She said it was actually easier for Bindi to stay home feeding crocodiles than to make the trip to Las Vegas. At first glance, the comment sounded almost funny, very Irwin-like, but longtime fans immediately understood the deeper meaning behind it. Feeding crocodiles at Australia's zoo is not easy work. It is physically demanding, dangerous, exhausting, and intense. The idea that Bindi could handle massive crocodiles more easily than a long flight revealed just how serious her health battle had quietly become. Robert stepped in beside his mother and tried to lighten the mood. He explained that Australia's zoo depended on hundreds of employees and conservation staff, and someone needed to stay behind to help manage operations. He smiled proudly while talking about his sister. But there was something emotional underneath that smile. The truth was that Bindi had spent more than a decade privately fighting a medical condition that slowly drained her energy, disrupted her life, and left her in severe pain while much of the world had no idea what she was enduring. For years, she kept showing up in public looking cheerful and energetic while quietly struggling behind the scenes. And, according to people close to the family, there were moments when the pain became almost unbearable. Bindi first shocked fans when she publicly revealed her diagnosis of endometriosis in 2023. She posted a photo from a hospital bed and described spending more than 10 years searching for answers. 10 years. During that decade, she underwent countless tests, scans, doctor visits, and treatments while trying to maintain her public image and continue her conservation work. Many doctors reportedly dismissed her symptoms. Others failed to identify the severity of the condition. Meanwhile, Bindi continued filming television appearances, running wildlife programs, traveling internationally, and raising a young family while suffering through pain that she later admitted often left her nauseated and physically overwhelmed. When surgeons finally operated, the extent of the condition stunned many people. Dozens of endometriosis lesions were discovered inside her body, along with a large cyst that had attached itself internally. The surgery brought relief, but it did not end the battle, because endometriosis is chronic. It returns, and in 2025, it returned aggressively. The year was supposed to be a celebration for the Irwin family. Robert Irwin's growing popularity had exploded internationally after joining Dancing with the Stars. The Steve Irwin Gala was becoming one of the biggest conservation fundraising events connected to the family's legacy. Publicly, everything looked successful. Privately, things were far more fragile. On the very night of the second Steve Irwin Gala in Las Vegas, Bindi had every intention of attending beside her mother and brother. She reportedly tried pushing through the pain anyway, but suddenly, the situation became serious. Doctors informed her that emergency surgery could no longer wait. Instead of walking the red carpet, Bindi boarded a flight to New York for urgent medical treatment. The emotional timing devastated the family. While cameras flashed in Las Vegas and guests celebrated Steve Irwin's legacy, Bindi was preparing for surgery. Not long afterward, she recorded a video message from her hospital bed explaining what had happened. Her appendix had been removed. Additional endometriosis lesions had been discovered and excised. A painful hernia connected to childbirth had also been repaired. The physical toll was staggering. By that point, surgeons had removed more than 50 endometriosis lesions across multiple procedures. For many viewers hearing the details for the first time, the realization was heartbreaking. This was not a temporary health scare. This was a long-term war happening quietly inside her body while the world watched her smile through it. Months later, Bindi finally admitted that she had reached a point where she could function normally again without constantly feeling sick or close to collapsing from pain. She said she finally felt like herself again. That sentence alone revealed how difficult the previous years had truly been. And suddenly, Terry's emotional reaction in Las Vegas made much more sense. The family was not simply protecting Bindi's privacy. They were protecting her recovery. As emotional as the health revelations were, the atmosphere shifted briefly when reporters brought up another topic that had become a running joke inside the Irwin family: Dancing with the Stars. Specifically, Robert's mission to convince Terri Irwin to join the show herself. By this point, both Bindi and Robert had become fan favorites on the competition series. Bindi famously won her season years earlier, while Robert's run on the show had turned him into one of the biggest breakout stars of the year. Fans immediately loved his charm, humor, awkward honesty, and emotional vulnerability. But Robert had apparently become obsessed with convincing his mother to compete next. When reporters asked Terri about it, she delivered a perfectly timed response. With a completely straight face, she joked that she would review the petition and respond within 5 to 7 business days. The room burst into laughter. Robert grinned beside her like a son who had been waiting for that exact moment. But underneath the humor was something surprisingly emotional. Robert explained that before joining the show, he never imagined himself as a dancer. Bindi had felt the same way years earlier. Yet, both of them ended up discovering confidence and joy through the experience. He joked that the dancing ability clearly came from Terri because Steve Irwin had absolutely no rhythm whatsoever. That line immediately made everyone laugh again. But then the conversation took a more emotional turn. Terri revealed that Bindi once described Dancing with the Stars as the closest thing she had ever experienced to flying. Not performing, not fame, freedom. For a young woman quietly carrying years of physical pain and emotional pressure, dancing had briefly allowed her to feel weightless. That memory clearly stayed with Terri, and it became even more emotional when fans remembered what had happened during Robert's own season of the show. One performance in particular changed everything. During dedication night, contestants were asked to honor someone deeply important in their lives. Robert chose his mother. Even before the dance began, viewers could tell he was struggling emotionally. Sitting in front of cameras during rehearsal footage, he tried speaking about Terri without breaking down. He explained that he had been only 2 years old when Steve Irwin died. As he grew older, he began understanding the impossible pressure Terri had carried after losing her husband in one of the most public tragedies imaginable. She had somehow continued raising 2 children while preserving Steve's legacy, operating Australia's zoo, continuing conservation work, and surviving unimaginable grief in front of the entire world. Robert admitted that every milestone in his life where he wished his father could have been present, his mother had stepped into that role instead. Then came the dance itself. As the music swelled, Terri eventually walked onto the ballroom floor in a bright yellow dress. Robert embraced her, lifted her, spun her across the stage, and by the end of the routine, both of them were visibly emotional. The judges were crying. The audience was crying. Even longtime viewers of the show admitted it was one of the most emotional performances they had seen in years. But the most devastating moment came afterward. Terri confessed that after Steve's death, there had been a long period where smiling no longer came naturally to her. She said there were days when simply getting out of bed felt impossible. Then she looked at her son and explained that her children had become the reason she kept moving forward. Not fame, not television, not public support. Her children. That moment changed the public perception of the Irwin family for many viewers. People stopped seeing them only as television personalities and began seeing them as survivors of grief that never fully disappeared. And then came the performance that may have emotionally broken the entire audience. Weeks later, Robert was assigned a dance inspired by one of the most iconic routines in Dancing with the Stars history. His sister Bindi's championship-winning tribute to Steve Irwin. The emotional pressure surrounding the performance was enormous. Bindi's original dance years earlier had become one of the most beloved moments in the show's history because it honored her late father with raw sincerity and emotion. Now, Robert had to step into that memory himself. When the performance finally aired, the ballroom became silent. Robert danced with incredible intensity, but nobody expected what happened at the end. Bindi herself walked onto the floor. As the music ended, she embraced Robert while projected footage of Steve Irwin holding a baby Robert appeared across the ballroom floor beneath them. The emotional impact was overwhelming. Robert immediately collapsed to his knees in tears. Even the judges struggled to speak afterward. The performance earned the first perfect score of the season. But by that point, the scores no longer mattered. The moment had become something much bigger than a dance competition. It was a family reliving grief, love, memory, and healing in front of millions of viewers. Behind the scenes, however, Robert himself was reaching physical exhaustion. Weeks of non-stop rehearsals had taken a major toll on his body. According to people involved with the production, Robert developed a serious rib injury during training that made even breathing painful. Certain dance lifts reportedly became so physically difficult that choreography had to be changed late in the competition. But Robert refused to quit. Friends close to the family later said he felt enormous pressure to make the Irwin family proud. And in the finale, all of that pressure finally paid off. The last episode became one of the most watched entertainment broadcasts of the year. Millions voted. The audience exploded when Robert's name was announced as the winner. Suddenly, history had been made. Robert and Bindi became the first siblings ever to both win mirrorball trophies. Terri cried openly in the audience. Bindi cheered beside her husband and daughter. And for one brief moment, the entire family looked genuinely happy after years of health scares, grief, and emotional hardship. But perhaps the most emotional moment came later during interviews at the Steve Irwin Gala, when reporters asked a question that follows the family everywhere. What would Steve Irwin think if he could see all of this?